Wings are one of the most magical elements you can add to your art, but they can also feel kind of intimidating. So today, I'll show you how to draw a wing with feathers that can look really cool in your sketchbook and just be fun to draw in general. And it's way easier than you think. So before I do that, I want to ask you a question. Do you know the number one mistake most artists make when drawing feathers? If you want to know that, stick around because I'm going to tell you later in this video. Okay, so get your sketchbooks ready and we're going to sketch some wings and you're going to learn about the anatomy. Let's go. Okay, so get your pencils ready and anything you want to draw with. The very first thing we need to do is we need to think about the armature of a bird wing. Okay, so that means the bone structure underneath and figuring out what actually is going on under there so you're not guessing. As a creature designer, one of our biggest, I wouldn't say worries, but one of our biggest responsibilities is to understand what is happening underneath the skin and the feathers and everything. Right here, this is called the humerus. So people have one too. Try to scoot it over here a little bit. Okay, so I want you to practice this along with me. Instead of having this vision in your head of the perfect wing, I want you to piece it together with me so that you're labeling everything as I'm labeling it, and you commit this to memory. Now, if you're doing this digitally, that's okay, but I would prefer traditionally because you can form an emotional bond by looking physically down at the point of contact on the paper. There's something magical that happens when we draw on paper. It's that rough, raw feeling. Okay, the second thing, we're going to go back up like this. Now I'm going to do a very light straight line first. This is to indicate where the ulna and the radius are going to be located within the wing. So first thing, at this joint, I'm just going to lightly put in the ulna. Okay, it's a thicker bone on the wing and it has a slight curve to it. You see how light I'm keeping this? Keep everything very light, especially those of you that are sketching with a pen, because it's really the point of no return. You're not going to have an eraser or anything. The second thing is the radius. So up here at the wrist, and I'm going to explain what happens in a bird wrist in a second. But you have the radius, which is slightly smaller, a little skinnier, and you're going to connect it to that elbow joint. All right, so what you should have is something that looks like this. Now I'm going to slightly outline the bone structure here so that you guys can see it on the screen. I never know how this is going to turn out per computer screens or if you guys are looking at it on your phone or whatever, so I want to make sure that you can see it. Okay, now the third thing is called the carpometacarpus. Okay, so say that 5 times fast. The carpometacarpus is connected by the 2 carpal bones right here. So you're just going to do, they almost look like 2 little pebbles. Okay, so the carpometacarpus is going to look something like this. You're going to keep it very light. I'm going to go across. I'm going to keep it rather small on my sketch page because, I mean, the end of my sketchbook is literally right there. So I got to keep everything in the picture plane. Okay, so the carpometacarpus going to come across like this. All right, and then you're going to have this cool little, it almost looks like an eyeball in there. Okay, you're going to open it up like that and then connect it. Right, like this. See how light and loose that I'm keeping this? Look how dark this section is. And look how light this section is. Okay, that's great. Keep it like that, everybody. And then what you do is you end it off with what's called the second digit. Okay, so you just come down through here. It almost looks like a finger bone. Okay, and a little point at the end. It's pretty cool. I bet most of you out there have probably never seen a wing fully look like this. It's pretty neat. This is one of the reasons why I love anatomy so much. So what I'm doing is I'm just darkening up inside right here so that you can see the sections for the different bones. Okay, so we have the humerus right there. Okay, and then what we have is the big one is called the ulna. Okay, it looks like an H. Sorry, everybody. And then up here is called the radius. So write it down. radius. Okay, and then what we have over here, oh, you know what, I almost forgot. There's a really cool little bone called the pollex. Sits right there. Those of you that have, drawn dragons and other things, there are wyverns, not dragons, but wyverns, where the pollex is literally like where their wings connect. It's kind of cool. It's just like, it's this neat little bone, because then the skin sits on top and the feathers and everything. Okay, so we got the pollex. Let me just call that out real quick. Okay, so the pollex, P-O-L-L-E-X. Okay, and then this right here is called the carpometacarpus. Just so I can write it a little bit more comfortably. C-A-R-P-O. Okay, we got that so far. And then metacarpus. Gotta love those Latin root names. Carpometacarpus, put a little dot there just so we know like what we're pointing at. We don't want the little dots to get in the way of anything. Okay, we're making progress. So guess what, everybody? The feathers will be growing off of those spots. Now remember what I said, what the number one mistake is? Well, I think you've earned that. If you've gotten this far, you've definitely earned it. The number one mistake is that beginner artists make leaf shapes, okay? The feathers feel flat, and they're treated as evenly spaced leaf shapes when they're not. So instead of thinking about the underlying structure and layering the wing and the feathers, we just kind of put it on evenly all the way down, and that's not the way to do it. So I'm telling you about the bone structure first. I'm going to put in a little shading here. Okay, like so. And then what I'll do is I'm going to show you how those feathers actually grow off. Now, what we have on the front part are the outer vein and the inner vein, right up here at the top. Okay, so let's just shorten this wing a little bit. Very, very light. And we'll get into all the coverts here in a second. I'll explain what the coverts are. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the underlying layer of the primary remiges. So those are the big feathers that poke out from that carpometacarpus. All right, so what we'll do, or the secondary digit. So what I'll do is we'll go 9 in this direction. Okay, and then what'll happen is it'll start over right around the elbow part, and then we'll do the secondary remiges going in the back like this. So those are the big feathers of the wing. Okay, now all of the layering and everything inside here, I'm going to do another drawing after that with the feathers included. Okay, so the next drawing we won't see the bones or anything for that matter. Matter of fact, speaking of the bones here, I'm just going to put in some shading here just to separate those two. All right, and if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're well on your way of learning the anatomy of a wing. Now, what's cool about this, before I go any further, is that if you're making up a creature like a dragon or a bat creature or something that doesn't have feathers, you can still follow the same bone structure, but you can manipulate the anatomy to fit whatever design you're making. That's the beautiful thing about being a creature artist. You can bend the rules as long as the bended rule is still believable. Always tell yourself that. You can make up muscles, but the muscles have to have a function, and the feathers too. Okay, so what we'll do is like right up here, this is called the outer vein. Okay, so outer vein. Okay, and then the inner vein, of course, is over here. So inner vein, V-A-N-E. Okay, so what you should have is a nice little chart coming here. Okay, we have the bone structure and everything. Now, how do we do this? Okay, so let's move up the sketchbook a little bit more. And whenever you do feathers, the big ones, they're not leaves. Okay, they're actually elongated and slightly pointed, almost like a finger. Okay, and what that does is it wraps all the way up here. Now, I'm not going to make everything perfect up here, because what'll happen is, like, you got that little, the quill part of the arm of the feather, and those attach right behind the carpo metacarpus. Okay, so you're going to have 9 this way, and then you have 9 this way, or actually 10, I'm sorry. So you have 10, and then you have 9 this way. So you have 19 total. All right, and then what you do is you just come down here with the arm of the feather, slightly bend it out, okay, like this. Now, that's if you want to learn the individual sections. What I suggest is just getting a very light silhouette of the overall arc of the wing, just for a peace of mind. Okay, so I'll show you how far down I'm going. All right, so you see the bone down here, the elbow? If I come off this at roughly 45 degrees, okay, right around there, that's where the secondary rimmages usually end. Okay, right about there. Because we're going to get into a bunch of other feathers. We're going to get into like the coverts, the axillars, marginal coverts, all of that stuff. Okay. By the way, if we're looking at the pullets up here, or just up here in general, this is the wrist. Let's just call it the wrist. Okay. Wrist area. Okay. All you beginners that are watching me, I don't expect you to memorize all of the anatomy that I'm using, but this is why it's a beautiful thing to write this stuff down inside your sketchbook. Okay, remember, your sketchbooks are your diary. All right, nobody is looking at your sketchbook but you, so you don't have to worry about making things perfect based on what you think others should see. Man, that's preaching to the choir there, because I've been saying that for a long time, and I fell victim to that. I was always worried about having my sketchbook open so certain people can see it. It's an insecurity thing, you know, especially when we're younger, like teens, early 20s, even mid 20s. We want that instant gratification of somebody else saying, yes, that's a good drawing. And you know, it's kind of like singing. Family members and friends are not honest when you suck at singing. So the same thing goes when you suck at drawing. That's why it's never a good idea to ask friends and family if the drawing looks good. Nope. Ask somebody you don't know but can do what you want to do. I guarantee you're going to get better results. Anyway, let's continue. By the way, if you don't know me by now, you kind of, please expect some rants, okay? I love going on little rants, but I try to make it educational. You know, most of the stuff that I talk about is, you know, things that have happened to me over the years. Okay, so a better way to do this would be to just number these. So you do 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and then 5, like this, and then you're going to get all the way down to 1. So 1 will happen roughly, like if you take the wrist and you go down like a 20-degree angle, I kind of spread those out a little too far. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's cheat it a little bit, but hey, it's a creature, right? Now make sure we have those arms going like this, just connecting them. See how loose that I'm keeping everything? This is the way I want you guys to be sketching this. Just keep it loose, and you're going to thank yourself later, because as your skills improve, you'll be able to darken areas that you feel more confident in. All right, so for example, I know the bone structure of a bird wing, so what I'll do is just make sure that everything is shaded in dark so that you guys can see it. If you've gotten this far, congratulations. I'm proud of you. And if it doesn't look like you think it should be looking, it's okay, because these things take a lot of practice. All right. Even if you're not an artist and you just happen to you know, peruse YouTube and all of a sudden the algorithm brought you here, I want to welcome you. I teach creature design, and just to get better as an artist. So hopefully you're finding this enjoyable. Okay, secondary. So you're going to have 4, 3, 2, and then 1. Guess what? It starts over again. Okay, so you have 1, and then I'll do 2, 3, and then they get smaller. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I just like to roll them off like that, do a nice little point. See how loose I'm keeping everything? They're not perfect feathers at all. But you have your arms like this. So you're going to have a nice little wing. And these are called your primary rimmages, secondary rimmages. Okay, and we'll put some more details on that in a second. Okay, everybody, now that we have a basic understanding of the bone structure of a bird wing. Now we can start drawing the feathers and the different layerings and everything. So what I'll do is I'll just flip the book and go to a new page, and I'm going to show you how I would start this. So first, very, very light. Keep this gestural. Sharpen your pencil, making sure that there's no dull end to it. Now, the problem that a lot of artists have, beginner artists, is they want to do each individual feather and they all shape the same way. Like all leaf shapes, you don't want to do that at first. Let's group them together in large sections, and then we can break them off into individual feathers. So first of all, we have the primary and secondary remiges. So it's going to be like the big shape coming down like this. Okay, so if you got your sketchbooks out right now, this doesn't have to be a large sketch, but just make it big enough to where you're comfortably making longer, cleaner lines versus staying in a small little spot on your sketch page. Second thing, we're actually going to go up top and we're going to sketch in the section of the marginal coverts. So remember where the wrist is up here and that funny little pollex bone? Well, the pollex bone is right behind this hump. Okay, so remember, go back here, there's the pollex, looks like a little thumb. Go up here. So now we're going to put in the marginal coverts. It's going to swoop around just like this. Keep it light, keep it loose. Second thing that we're going to look at are the primary coverts. So it's going to happen right underneath it. So it's going to be the primary and secondary coverts. Okay, so it's going to look a little strange at first. You're going to start out here in about like the middle of the wing, and you're going to come in, and it's going to look like they're going to break. You're going to come back out like this. Now this section right here, I'll tell you what this is in a second, right before it gets to the bird body. But here you have your primary and your secondary coverts. Okay. Now inside this section, you can even break that off into 2 rows. Okay, so there's 1 row here, 2 row here. Okay. Now down here, these are called the axillars, okay, and we'll get into those in a second. But all the primary and secondary remiges, those big feathers, remember what we drew before, where it has 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it breaks off and it goes to number 9 as it gets closer to the body. All right. So what happens is those feathers, they actually start growing downward. Like this, so very, very light. And then they start to branch and kind of wave off this way. Now I'm not counting, I'm just telling you the shapes. I might be like 1 or 2 off here, so we'll see. I don't know yet. But here, we have a basic wing happening already. So this is when it gets really, really fun. Okay, so when you want to make a realistic wing, it's all about layering. Okay, so see this line coming across here? This is what's separating primary and secondary coverts from the remiges. Okay, so over top of each corner right here, so you can see the line coming up and it meets this that I'm drawing across right now. Roughly in there, you want to place just the hint of the feathers coming down. See how light I'm being with this? And what happens is those are wavy too. Okay. You can probably even break off this section too, because each bird wing is different. Okay, so you have your secondary ones right there, and then you got your smaller ones. Now the smaller ones, see the angle in which I'm drawing these lines coming out? These feathers have a concave effect. Okay, they're swooping in like this. Well, the ones up here, the secondary coverts, they actually come out almost like a waterfall. They don't have to be exactly placed. Okay, if you want realism, just know that even in nature, as wonderful as it is, it's not perfect. And the overlapping of fur and feathers and hair and everything, that's what makes animals so special. There's little imperfections in the, in our skin, and scales on a lizard, scales on even bird legs, you name it. Okay, and then up here, we're just going to hint at small little puffy feathers. Those are where the marginal coverts are. It's different for each bird. You look at an eagle, you look at a flamingo, you look at whatever you want to look at, whatever bird you want to look at, and they're all different. So we're not getting into huge amounts of detail, but you can start to see how these are breaking up now. Like this. Okay, so you have these sections starting to happen. All right, and it's going to start looking more and more realistic the more you layer these. Now at the ends of the feathers down here, this is where a lot of beginner artists mess up. They're not perfect diamond shapes at the end, and they don't look like leaves. But what they do look like is pointy, and then you slightly round them off. Okay, so I'll just turn my wrist here like this. So they're not perfectly pointy, they're kind of rounded at the end. Now you can start to see this really nice little shape here. Start to see the realism and the believability in the shapes of these feathers. Now, one thing I promised to talk about are the axillars. Okay, so the axillars come down here. They're right inside the wing. And they layer facing down. Now, if you're doing a creature and you're making it up, you can do all sorts of different really cool things with these types of feathers. Axillars are different for each bird. Okay, what we're drawing is a dove wing. Okay, it's a I don't remember exactly what species I wanted to start with, but it's essentially a dove wing. Just because they're smaller and they're easier to draw, but they're big enough to where you can still see a lot of details. There we go. Okay, so now what I could do is I can just start adding some values across the wing, and of course if I really wanted to illustrate this I could and spend hours and hours and hours and hours on it, but hopefully you get the gist of what these feathers are actually doing. Now, how do we connect these down here? When you look at the secondary coverts, okay, the ones that hang down right here, they actually start bending towards the axillars like this. And then as you get to the middle of the wing, remember how we split the primary and secondary remages, these large ones? So you go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, this is where they split, right around here, because there's 10 of them. For this wing, right there is where they would split. Okay, so you would have something that looks like this. Okay, you have your secondary coverts right there, and then they would split. Not that cleanly, but something along those lines. And then they would start growing in this direction. Okay, something like that. So this area is pretty important because there's going to be like a slight bend in every line that you draw. Like when we start to section off the different sections for the feathers, you'll see that bend right there. Okay, there we go. And then we can start the secondary remages down here. There's not really a huge gap in there. The feather down here, to separate them, it's kind of an overlap. And then they start going straight down. Remember, slightly pointy, but not completely pointed like a knife or anything. You don't want to do that. There we go. Be rough with this too, guys. If you're drawing this right now, I know it's a lot to take in. Okay, there's a lot of different wing anatomy names, and just it's probably really new to you. You might have been drawing flying animals for years and never even knew some of this terminology, but I'm just throwing these terms out at you. Write them down, okay, especially when we're doing the bones, okay? So write them down, especially if you're doing the bones, because once you learn the underbelly or the underworkings of the creatures that you're drawing, they're going to become a lot easier.